when the evil terrorist organization known as Legion threatens to conquer the world with their dastardly schemes. It's time to call upon the special agents of the clandestine group known only as Mayhem. These agents may be a ragtag group of mercenaries, soldiers, and vainglorious bounty hunters, but they'll do whatever it takes to stop Legion in their tracks and save the day. Agents of Mayhem is a third-person shooter where you take on the role of a group of international crime fighters as they try to stop a legion of supervillains from destroying the world. At the start of the game, the villains have started attacking the city of Seoul in futuristic Korea, and you must put together a team of agents in order to set out and put a stop to their evil schemes. Gameplay is familiar third-person shooting in a sandbox environment. There's a large, well-detailed city filled with roaming enemies, challenges, and collectibles. And mission locations are indicated by special icons that you can activate when you want to progress the story. The missions themselves are traditional action game fare, with you having to either defeat waves of enemies, take on special bosses, or complete platforming segments in order to progress. Now, where things get interesting is that unlike a traditional shooter where you have one player character who can equip multiple weapons and items as the game and combat progress, instead what you have in Agents of Mayhem is a character-based shooter where you have multiple playable characters and each of them only has one weapon that they equip for the entire game. And while this seems inherently restrictive, the game balances it out by allowing you to select a team of 3 different characters and then switch between them anytime you want, even during the heat of combat. In effect, the system allows you to have 3 different weapons available at any one time. And on top of that, each character has unique special abilities, such as being able to throw grenades or turn invisible. So being able to switch between your different agents allows you different tactical options depending upon what your objectives are. On top of that, completing missions and defeating enemies will reward you with gadgets and upgrades, which can help you customize your agents and further refine and specialize their roles in combat. Switching agents also has a defensive value as well, as anyone not currently in combat will regenerate their health. Now, on the positive side, Agents of Mayhem has a lot of good content. Like a lot of contemporary games, it's got a large, colorful map full of missions, side quests, and secret collectibles to find and gather. You have 12 playable characters to find and unlock, as well as multiple levels of upgrades for each of them. And there's a good variety of enemies and objectives to keep you on your toes.
You can't fight our firepower!
One thing I appreciated was how fast and fluidly the game plays. For instance, every character has a triple jump, so it's easy to climb and take advantage of the map's verticality. There's also no fall damage, so there's no penalty for exploration. Like most sandbox games, if you don't want to hoof it on foot, you have the option to steal a vehicle in order to get around. However, Agents of Mayhem also allows you to summon a vehicle to your exact location at any time. It's incredibly convenient, if also incredibly dangerous for anyone else nearby. Story missions also don't clear the entire map, which means that you can take on secondary objectives or targets of opportunity without invalidating your current mission progress. The combat itself also has really strong pacing. There's a bit of a learning curve, but once you start to recognize that Specific characters are strong versus certain types of enemies, and can even cause special status effects, such as reducing an enemy's speed or armor, then you'll eventually get into the rhythm of swapping characters in and out based on the flow of battle. In most action games, when your character becomes injured, you need to retreat. But remember, in Agents of Mayhem, all you have to do is swap out a character in order to recuperate. So once you start learning to do this instinctively, you'll find that combat, like the rest of the game, becomes fast and fluid, as regularly swapping characters in and out keeps you in the fight longer and allows you to perform more effectively. Now, unfortunately, Agents of Mayhem does have some downsides, and they are not insignificant. The first and most straightforward is that the side missions are fairly repetitive. Most of them are just basic iterations of travel to a location and blow up some enemy troops, which is fine if tragically predictable. Then there are assault missions, where you'll either be attacking underground enemy layers or above-ground fortresses. The layers will at least represent a minor challenge, if not a repetitive one, as they are each randomly generated from a collection of rooms. Now, each of the layers will, on their own, try to offer you slightly different objectives, but overall they don't have a lot of variety when it comes to design or mechanical implementation, and most of them wind up blending together and feeling very similar, especially by the end of the game. However, the biggest and most egregious example of repetitive game design is the above-ground fortresses. These special outposts represent locations that need to be captured so that you can scan the surrounding area for other side quests and objectives. However, once you've captured them once, and this is the thing that's really frustrating, they can be retaken by the enemy later on, which might have been interesting if it required you to change your tactics or equipment each time in order to succeed. But no, the enemy just puts the same troops and the same equipment in the same positions every time, which means that you are literally just replaying the same material over and over. Even in the second half of the game, when they try to spice things up by adding special mini-bosses to the fortresses, it's still not enough, since you can run directly past these guys and complete the fortress without ever having to deal with them. However, beyond repetition, Agents of Mayhem's bigger problem is that not all the characters have been created equally. Specifically, not all the agents' weapons have been tuned as well as other contemporary games. There are a lot of guns in here that don't feel like they have the appropriate feedback or effect in the game. For a specific example, this is the character of Hardtack. He is armed with a shotgun. Now, in most video game simulations, shotguns deal higher damage the closer you are to an enemy, and as range increases, either the damage or the accuracy of the shotgun goes down. But here, in Hardtack's case, if you attack an enemy beyond 5 to 6 meters, instead what happens is your shotgun shells turn into pixie dust and butterfly kisses. There's no reduction of effect, there's no fall off in damage, it just stops working entirely. Now, granted, the game does at least allow your reticle to indicate when you are within effective range, so you can get around this, but what I'm getting at is that it's still a very noticeable and inconvenient inconsistency. That there's this hard line between 5 and 6 meters where your gun works, and then all of a sudden, it just stops. And Hardtack isn't the only one with these problems. I'd say almost half of the characters have some minor drawback, either dealing with the recoil, reload speed, or just general overall effectiveness of their weapon. And because, as I mentioned before, every character only has one weapon that they use all the time, you're going to be noticing these inconsistencies fairly quickly. There's also not a lot of character specialization either. that out of an entire roster of a dozen different people, only one of them specializes at long-range attacks, and one of them specializes in melee attacks. Everybody else, which makes up 90% of your team, is pretty much just somebody who uses a firearm to attack enemies at mid to close range. And while there is a certain stability in all of that, since most of the game is built around run-and-gun combat, it also means that there's no chance to build unique teams with special strategies that only they can pull off. Man, scoring Agents of Mayhem is a little difficult. I did enjoy Agents of Mayhem. The combat, when it worked really well. It has a dynamic fluidity and a rhythm that sets it apart from its contemporaries. But I also can't ignore that some of the characters and missions weren't as fun to play. I'm going to go ahead and give it 3 out of 4 stars, but a recommendation of only maybe. If you want a loose, over-the-top action game in a sandbox environment, then this might actually be a good choice for you. But if you're looking for a third-person shooter with tight controls and precise combat, this might not be the one for you. Alright, well thanks again for watching, and you go have fun out there, but try not to cause too much trouble.